Let's take a look at some of the features and listen to some of the sounds on the Roland RD700sx. As you can see, the interface here is very simple, which is very nice to use. On our left-hand side, we've got our master volume. Now, as you can see, my master volume is turned all the way up, and the reason that I do this is so that I can make the sound guy's job a whole lot easier. If you bring your volume down to about 3/4 or even halfway, and you're playing, and all of a sudden you feel like you can't hear yourself and you turn yourself up, it's going to make his job a lot harder, because all of a sudden, here's this keyboard that's just sticking way out in the mix. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be a hindrance in playing. So I would encourage you to max out your volume all the way. We've got a button here that's called V-Link, and that's a little bit more than what we're going to talk about in this particular gear review. So if you want to know more about that, you can always go to Roland's website and check that out. Next, we have our EQ setting, and here we can choose to customize and tailor the way that our sound sounds. We can boost the lows and make it a little bit fuller. We can, if the sound is a little honky sounding, we can take out some of the mids. If we want to brighten it up, we can brighten up the highs as well. We also have reverb, chorus, and multi-effects. And so, for instance, on the reverb, I've got a hall here, and I use that quite a bit. I don't use the EQ as much. I usually let the sound guy tailor that sound. But I do use the reverb quite a bit more. And so right now, here's just kind of a dry piano sound. And then here it is with a hall. Gives it a little bit more ambience, gives it a little bit more room, and that's a nice thing. We have chorus and delay, which I don't use that a whole lot, and then the multi-effects, and we'll talk about that as we get into some different sounds. Next, we have our zone switch and control area. Now, this is something that you will use a lot, especially if you're using this keyboard to lead worship. If you're out front, if you're singing, and you need to layer sounds, you can do that with this. We've got 4 individual faders for which I can tie different sounds to each one of those faders. For instance, I could have an acoustic piano on one, an electric piano on another, and then a pad on another as well. And I can control the volumes of those simply by bringing these up or down on the fly. So if I was leading worship and I wanted to take out the piano sounds and just have the pad, I could pull those down really quickly and just have the pad and move seamlessly, say, into like a prayer moment or something where it needs to be a lot lighter and reflective. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more as we talk about how to layer the sounds together. There are some other buttons here that I really don't use a whole lot. There's an arpeggio button that I never use. The transpose button, if for some reason you can't play in a particular key, then you can use the transpose button. And for instance, if you can't play in the key of D flat, well, you could transpose it up a half step and play in C. You play in C, but it would sound in D flat. Now that gets a little bit complicated and could be a little confusing as you're reading a chart. So I would encourage you, instead of using the transpose button, just really learn all your scales and learn everything you can in order to play in those particular keys. Next, we have a split button. So if you wanted to split the keyboard and have, say, like an upright bass in the left hand and a piano or an electric piano in the right hand, you could. You could split it and have pad and strings. There's a variety of ways that you can do that. But really, I use more the layering effect than I do the split. Next, we have the LCD screen here, and that just gives you all your information. It tells you what kind of sound that you're using. You can look at it and look at different tone information. You can look at zone information so that if you're layering different sounds, it can tell you which sounds that you're layering together. Next, we have our cursor buttons where you can move up, down, left, and right, and then your increase, decrease. Now, this is the way that you choose your sounds. Right now, I'm in a kind of a piano bank. And if I want to change between sounds in that bank, I use my increase decrease. So for right now I'm using the superior grand and it sounds like this. This is a X ultimate. Notice to me it doesn't sound as big as the first. We've got a dark ballad. So that could be a nice tone for, you know, something that's reflective sounding, and you want it real light and not as harsh, not as bright. That could be something that's really nice. But again, you use your increase, decrease buttons to cycle through those and figure out which one you want to use. Speaking of banks, we can talk about that now in this section. This is where we choose kind of our banks of sounds to pull from. Just think of if you don't know what a bank is, just think of it as a pool of a particular kind of sound. For instance, I have a piano bank. So I've got a pool of acoustic pianos that I can choose from. I have an electric piano bank. I have a pool of different kinds of electric pianos to choose from. So in the electric pianos, the first one that we come to is the EP1, and it kind of sounds like this. That's what that sounds like. You can hear that it has a little bit of a tremolo effect to it. Kind of has a little of a warble sound to it. So that's the EP1. This is a stage phaser, so it's got a phasing effect to it. Here it kind of has that kind of a little bit of a warble to it, and kind of this electric sound to it. We have a hit EP. Now this kind of has an 80s sound to it. As you can tell, that definitely has kind of a bell sound to it, and it's what I would describe as kind of an 80s sounding keyboard, even getting into the 90s as well. We've got different kind of 60s electric pianos. Phaser EPs, stage cabinets. This is a New York electric piano. Let's see what that sounds like. So that's kind of nice lounge sounding. So that's our electric pianos, and again, there are a host of sounds. We're not even covering near all the sounds in these. We have clavinets and mallets. So for instance, if you wanted to do like a marimba, things like that, it's kind of got that sound to it there. We've got bells, chime bells. If you were doing something at Christmas, you could use that. There's music box. There's island mallets. If you were doing some kind of Caribbean or reggae kind of thing. So those are the mallets. Organs. Okay, tone wheel organs. If you don't know what a tone wheel organ is, or like a Hammond B3 organ, basically it's an electric organ that was designed to emulate like a pipe organ. But it's electric instead of pipes. And the big key difference is one of the speakers is called a Leslie. And inside that Leslie are several speakers that rotate, and it gives you this really cool sound. So first, this is just kind of a standard tone wheel organ. And if I just play this chord, it sounds kind of dry. You can hear a little bit of motion in there. But if I kick in the Leslie, hear how it's sped up and then it slowed down. That's kind of the key to B3 organs. So you can have So that's kind of the way that works. Now, there are a variety of tone wheel organs that give you different sounds, and that's because truly, there are some endless combinations that you can do with a Hammond B3 organ, which we'll talk about in another kind of gear review. So there's a lot of options there at your disposal. Using organs is really good if you don't need to play the piano and say it's a fast song and a pad just really doesn't do it, then the organ really can be something that really cuts through the mix, provides some foundation with the chords, kind of almost like a pad. It helps glue things together, but when you need it to cut through and do kind of some solo stuff or to really provide some energy, it can really do the thing. And we'll talk about playing the organ in some other videos. Next we have strings, we've got pads, and I really use the pads a whole lot more than I do anything else. So this is a soft pad. So pads are really nice to help glue things together. Sometimes when you're playing a piano or an electric piano, it can get a little thin. The sound doesn't carry as long as it could. So when you layer a pad in, it helps just really glue things together and give you a good sense of tone that helps carry over. There are guitars and bass, winds, synths, things like that. I really don't use any of that on this particular keyboard. You have a one-touch button here, so if you have your favorite piano or electric piano sound, you can program it to these two buttons. The setup here is where we begin to customize our sound, customize layering sounds together. We do that and we choose the different zones. We have an upper 1 and 2, we have a lower 1 and 2, and that's how they're programmed to these faders over here. As you can see, you have upper 1 and 2, lower 1 and 2. So we choose which sound we want, we program it, we put it over here, and then we save it. That's what this over here is all about. We start writing the sounds to a patch. And then right here we have expansions. So Roland has expansion cards that you can purchase to put in, some of them that have better sounds, some of them that have expanded sounds. And you can put it in here and then you can choose from those particular expansions. So that's pretty much the interface right there, which as you can see, it's a fairly simple interface to use. So hopefully this really gives you a good sense of the way that works. Now what we're going to talk about is layering sounds. Let's look at that now.